Snow drifted across the empty sidewalk as Daniel Wright sat beneath the warm lights of the holly and pine, watching his blind date walk out the door without so much as a backward glance. The restaurant hummed with festive energy, laughter spilling from corner booths, the clink of wine glasses, a jazz rendition of The Christmas Song floating through the air. Garland twisted around wooden beams overhead, twinkling with tiny white lights that should have felt magical. Instead, they felt like spotlights on his failure. "And where in the world are you joining from today? Let me know in the comments below." Now I hope you enjoy the story. Daniel stared at the untouched plate of lobster ravioli across from him, still steaming. She'd ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, taken 3 bites, then excused herself to the restroom. 20 minutes ago. He'd known she wasn't coming back the moment her phone buzzed, and her face shifted. Polite smile dropping into something like disgust as she read whatever message had come through. Probably from a friend. Probably confirmation that he wasn't worth staying for. His chest tightened. The couples around him looked so easy together, so naturally fitted. He loosened his tie, charcoal gray, carefully chosen, and wondered what he'd done wrong this time. Been too quiet? Not funny enough? Sarah from the office had sworn this would be different. "She's perfect for you, Danny. Just be yourself." Himself? Right. The waiter had passed by twice now, eyes sympathetic, saying nothing. Daniel could feel the pity radiating from the surrounding tables. The successful businessman, sitting alone on Christmas Eve, talking to no one. He reached for his wallet, ready to pay for a meal neither of them had eaten, when a voice, warm, slightly rushed, unmistakably kind, broke through his spiral. "Okay, so I'm going to do something totally unprofessional here, and you can absolutely tell my manager if you want, but—" Daniel looked up. A waitress stood at his table, tray balanced on one hip, dark curls escaping from a ponytail, eyes bright with something between mischief and genuine concern. "Nobody should eat lobster ravioli alone on Christmas Eve, especially not when they've been sitting here looking like their dog just ran away." Daniel blinked, caught completely off guard. What? "Your dog," she repeated, setting down a basket of fresh bread he hadn't ordered. "Or your childhood goldfish. Or whatever it is that's making you look like Christmas just got canceled." She pulled out the chair across from him, the one his date had abandoned, and sat down without invitation. "I'm Mara, by the way. And before you worry, yes, I'm supposed to be working. But it's slow right now and my manager Tony is in the back having his 4th cannoli of the night, so we've got maybe 7 minutes before he notices I'm fraternizing with customers." Daniel couldn't help it. A surprised laugh escaped him. "Fraternizing? Big word, right? I've been studying for the GRE." Mara grinned, reaching for a piece of bread and tearing it in half. "Anyway, I've been watching you for the last 20 minutes, and I've got a theory." "A theory." "Blind date," she said confidently, pointing at him with the bread, "set up by a well-meaning friend." She seemed nice at first, but then she got a text, probably from her actual boyfriend, and bailed. "Left you here with 2 entrees and a bottle of wine you can't drink alone without looking sad." Daniel felt his face flush. "That obvious?" "Only to someone who's seen it happen about 100 times in this place." Her expression softened. "Christmas Eve is rough for blind dates. Too much pressure. Everyone's trying to force magic, you know." She pushed the bread basket toward him. "I'm Mara Collins, by the way, 3rd-year grad student, professional food bringer, and apparently tonight's unauthorized therapist." "Daniel Wright," he managed, taking the bread mostly because she seemed so insistent. "Unauthorized therapy patient, apparently." "So what's your story, Daniel Wright?" Mara leaned forward, chin resting on her hand. "And please tell me you're not secretly married or something, because that would really complicate my theory." There was something about her, the easy warmth, the lack of judgment, The way she looked at him like he was a person instead of a disappointment that made him want to keep talking. "Not married," he said quietly. "Just bad at this." "Bad at what? Dating?" Mara shook her head. "Nobody's bad at dating. They're just bad at pretending to be someone they're not." She studied him for a moment, her brown eyes thoughtful. "Let me guess. You spent all week planning this, picked the perfect restaurant, wore your nicest suit, rehearsed conversation topics in your head." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe." "And she spent the whole dinner looking at her phone and checking the time." "Pretty much." Mara sighed, leaning back in the chair. "See, that's not you being bad at dating. That's her being rude." She glanced toward the kitchen, then back at him. "Okay, so here's the thing. My shift ends in about 40 minutes, and I was supposed to go straight to my mom's house for our annual Christmas Eve disaster. And I say disaster affectionately, because there will be too much food, too many people, and my Aunt Linda will definitely cry during Silent Night." She paused, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "But Mom always makes way too much lasagna, and there are about 15 people coming, and honestly, one more won't even be noticed." Daniel stared at her. "Are you inviting me to your family's Christmas?" "I'm inviting you to not spend Christmas Eve alone in your apartment eating takeout and feeling sorry for yourself." Mara's voice was gentle but direct. "Which is what you were planning to do, right?" He wanted to deny it, but she wasn't wrong. His penthouse downtown suddenly felt painfully empty in his mind, all glass and marble and silence. He'd been planning to pour himself a scotch, maybe catch up on work emails, pretend the holiday wasn't happening around him. "I don't even know you," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "True, but you seem nice, you've got sad eyes, and you didn't yell at me for sitting down uninvited, which means you have decent manners." She stood up, pulling a pen from her apron pocket and scribbling something on a napkin. "Look, no pressure, but this is my mom's address. Dinner starts at 7:30. Bring wine if you want to impress people. Bring nothing if you don't care. Either way, there will be lasagna, terrible Christmas movies, and zero judgment." She slid the napkin across the table. Daniel picked it up, reading the address, a neighborhood in Queens he vaguely recognized. Normal, middle class, the kind of place where people probably knew their neighbors' names. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, looking up at her. Mara smiled, and it reached all the way to her eyes. "Because I've worked here for 3 years, and I've seen a lot of people get stood up. Most of them deserved it. You don't strike me as someone who deserves it." She grabbed her tray, backing towards the kitchen. "Plus, my mom loves meeting new people. She'll ask you a million questions, but she makes a mean tiramisu, so it evens out." "Mara." 7:30, Daniel Wright. "Don't make me eat all that lasagna myself." And then she was gone, disappearing into the kitchen before he could find another excuse. Daniel sat there, napkin in hand, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Daniel almost didn't go. He sat in his car outside the address for a full 10 minutes, engine idling, watching the warm glow of lights spilling from the windows of a modest 2-story house. Through the curtains, he could see shapes moving, people laughing, gesturing, living. His hand hovered over the gear shift. He could still leave. Drive back to Manhattan, order that takeout, pretend this whole night had never happened. Then the front door burst open, and Mara appeared on the porch, waving at him like she'd been watching for his arrival. No escape now. "You came," she called out as he stepped out of his Mercedes, immediately self-conscious about the car in this neighborhood of Hondas and Toyotas. She'd changed out of her work uniform into jeans and a chunky red sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. I wasn't sure you would. Mom made me check the window every 5 minutes. I brought wine, Daniel said, holding up the bottle. A 2015 Bordeaux that probably cost more than he should admit. Fancy? Mara grinned, linking her arm through his like they were old friends. Fair warning, it's chaos in there. My brother Leo is arguing with his husband about whether Die Hard counts as a Christmas movie. Aunt Linda has already started crying. About appetizers this time, not even the songs yet. And my mom has been cooking since Thursday. The moment Daniel stepped inside, he was hit by a wall of warmth. Not just temperature, but the kind that came from too many people in too small a space, all of them happy about it. The house smelled like garlic, tomatoes, fresh bread, and cinnamon. A crooked Christmas tree stood in the corner, covered in mismatched ornaments that looked handmade. Voices overlapped from the kitchen and living room, punctuated by bursts of laughter. Everyone, Mara announced. This is Daniel. He's my friend. He likes wine. And yes, before you ask, he's single. Mara! Daniel felt his face go red. A woman in her 60s emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron that read, "Kiss the cook, or don't, I'm not your mom." She had Mara's warm eyes and easy smile. Ignore my daughter. I'm Rita. Welcome, sweetheart. You're just in time. The lasagna's got 10 more minutes. Before Daniel could respond, he was swept into the chaos. A tall man with paint-stained hands, Leo, apparently, shook his hand enthusiastically. Finally, someone on my side. Die Hard is obviously a Christmas movie, right? It takes place during a Christmas party, Daniel offered carefully. See? Leo turned triumphantly to his husband, James, who rolled his eyes affectionately. Aunt Linda, a tiny woman with glittering holiday earrings, pressed a glass of something sparkling into Daniel's hand. You look thin. Does nobody feed you in the city? Mom feeds everyone, Mara whispered, rescuing him with a gentle tug toward the dining room. It's her love language. The table was already crowded. Extended family, a few neighbors, someone's college roommate who couldn't get home for the holidays. Plates passed in every direction. Rita's lasagna was, as promised, incredible. Daniel found himself sandwiched between Mara and a teenager named Sophie, who spent 20 minutes explaining her robotics project with infectious enthusiasm. So what do you do, Daniel? Rita asked from across the table, her voice cutting through the chatter with maternal authority. I'm in real estate development, he said, bracing himself for the usual follow-up questions about money. Instead, Rita just nodded. That sounds stressful. You getting enough sleep? The unexpected kindness of it caught him off guard. Not really, no. Nobody does anymore. She passed him more bread. Eat, you'll feel better. Later, after the dishes were cleared and people had migrated to the living room, Daniel found himself on the couch with a slice of tiramisu, watching Mara's family navigate a cutthroat game of charades. Leo was acting out something incomprehensible, while James guessed increasingly absurd options. Sophie was keeping score with the seriousness of a Supreme Court judge. Your family is... Daniel trailed off, searching for the right word. Loud, overwhelming, slightly unhinged, Mara supplied, sitting down beside him. Wonderful, he finished quietly. She looked at him then, really looked at him. And something shifted in her expression, surprise giving way to understanding. You don't have this, do you? The chaos, I mean. Daniel shook his head. My parents divorced when I was 8. Dad's in Boston, remarried. Mom's in Arizona, also remarried. I see them maybe twice a year. Holidays are usually just quiet. Quiet sounds lonely. It is. Mara bumped her shoulder against his. Well, you've got us now. Fair warning, though. Once my mom decides she likes someone, you're basically adopted. She'll start texting you recipes and asking about your cholesterol. Honestly? Daniel smiled, something warm loosening in his chest. That sounds kind of perfect. Across the room, Rita caught his eye and winked. He was home. Daniel woke up Christmas morning in his penthouse with his phone already in his hand. Scrolling back through the previous night like he needed proof it had actually happened. There were photos. Mara had insisted. Him attempting charades and failing spectacularly, Rita forcing a Santa hat onto his head. The whole family crammed onto the couch for a group picture, with Daniel somehow right in the middle, laughing at something Leo had said. He looked happy. Actually happy. His phone buzzed. Mara. Merry Christmas. Mom wants to know if you made it home okay and also if you're allergic to anything because she's already planning New Year's dinner and you're invited. Daniel smiled, typing back quickly. Daniel. Merry Christmas. Made it home safe. Not allergic to anything. Your mom is incredible. Mara. She really is. Also, she asked if you have a good winter coat because that thin thing he was wearing last night won't cut it in January. Her words, not mine. Daniel. Tell her I'll invest in a better one. Mara. She also asked if you're eating breakfast right now, or if you're one of those people who just drinks coffee and calls it a meal. Daniel looked at his empty kitchen, then at the espresso machine. Daniel, I'm one of those people. Mara. Daniel. Okay, change of plans. I'm coming over. Daniel. What? Mara. I have leftover tiramisu and my mom packed you enough lasagna to feed a small army. She was worried you'd starve. What's your address? He hesitated for only a moment before sending it. An hour later, Mara stood in his living room, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the minimalist furniture, the complete absence of anything personal. She turned to him, eyebrows raised. Daniel, where's your stuff? This is my stuff. No, I mean like photos, books, a blanket that doesn't match the aesthetic, evidence that a human lives here. She walked to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. It's beautiful, but it's like a hotel. He'd never thought about it that way, but she was right. Everything was curated, perfect, empty. I work a lot, he said quietly. I guess I never really thought about making it feel like home. Mara turned back to him, and her expression was gentle. Home isn't about the space, you know. It's about the people in it. She held up the container of lasagna. Which is why I'm here, to make sure you actually eat something that isn't made by a personal chef or ordered through an app. They sat at his dining table, the one he never used, and ate Rita's lasagna straight from the container. Mara told him stories about her grad school program, her dreams of becoming a therapist, the reason she'd been working at the restaurant for 3 years. Tuition's expensive, and I refuse to drown in loans if I can help it. That's smart, Daniel said. What made you want to be a therapist? She was quiet for a moment, fork hovering. I think everyone deserves someone who actually listens, really listens, without judgment. Her eyes met his. Kind of like what you needed last night. Daniel's chest tightened. You barely know me. Maybe, but I know lonely when I see it. She reached across the table, her hand covering his. You don't have to be, you know. Lonely. And for the first time in years, Daniel believed her. The weeks that followed felt like waking up from a long sleep. Daniel found himself doing things he'd never made time for. Small things. Human things. On New Year's Eve, Mara dragged him ice skating in Central Park. He fell 3 times, the first 2 accidentally, the third on purpose just to make her laugh. The sound of it, bright and unrestrained, was worth the bruised tailbone. You're terrible at this, she called out, skating circles around him with infuriating ease. I'm a real estate developer, not an Olympic athlete. You're a grown man afraid of frozen water. But she took his hand anyway, steadying him, and they glided together in clumsy loops while snow began to fall around them. In mid-January, over coffee at a tiny cafe in her neighborhood, nowhere he'd ever been, nothing like the corporate lunch spots he frequented, Mara asked him the question he'd been dreading. Why real estate? Is it what you actually wanted to do? Daniel stirred his coffee, watching the cream swirl. My father built his company from nothing. When I graduated college, it felt like the only path that made sense, the only one he'd respect. But do you like it? The honest answer sat heavy in his throat. I'm good at it. I've built something successful. That's not what I asked. He looked up at her then, at the way she watched him. Patient, open, waiting for the truth he'd never said out loud. No, I don't think I do. She reached across the table, fingers threading through his. Then what would you do? If you could do anything? The question terrified him, but with her hand in his, it also felt like possibility. By February, things had shifted. Daniel started leaving work at reasonable hours. He had dinner with Mara and Rita every Sunday. He bought a bookshelf for his apartment and actually filled it. Novels Mara recommended, books about architecture he'd always meant to read. One evening, Mara arrived at his place exhausted from a brutal exam. She collapsed on his couch, the one he'd recently covered with an actual throw blanket per her instructions, and he made her tea without being asked. You're getting domestic, she teased, accepting the mug. I'm learning, he corrected. She smiled, tucking herself against his side. From who? From you. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You make me want to be someone who has a life, not just a career. Daniel Wright, she murmured, eyes drifting closed. I think you're becoming my favorite project. Yeah? Yeah. In March, he did something he'd never imagined. He called his father and told him he was stepping back from the company, not leaving, but delegating more, making space for something beyond acquisitions and profit margins. The conversation didn't go well, but when he hung up, hands shaking, Mara was there, and Rita had sent him a text. Proud of you, sweetheart. For the first time, Daniel felt like he was building something real, not a portfolio, a life. By late March, Daniel started pulling away, not intentionally, not even consciously at first, but Mara noticed. He canceled their Sunday dinner, said he had a meeting that ran late, even though it was the first time he'd missed in 2 months. The next week, his texts came slower, shorter. When they did see each other, he seemed distracted, his mind somewhere else. Hey, Mara said one evening as they walked through her neighborhood. Where are you right now? Because it's not here. Daniel stopped, hands shoved deep in his pockets, the new winter coat Rita had bullied him into buying. I'm here. You're not. Her voice was gentle, not accusing. You've been somewhere else for 2 weeks. Talk to me. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Worn jeans, thrift store jacket, scarf she'd knitted herself because it was cheaper than buying one. She was working 2 jobs to finish grad school, living in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, building a future through sheer determination and hope. And he was, what? A man who'd inherited his position, who'd spent years chasing success he didn't even want, who still didn't know what he was doing with his life at 34. You deserve better than this, he said quietly. Mara's brow furrowed. Better than what? Than me. Than someone who's still figuring out who he is. You've got your whole life planned out. You know what you want, you're working toward it. I'm just drifting. Daniel. I'm a mess, Mara. I'm stepping away from my career. I barely know what I want to do next, and I'm basically rebuilding my entire life from scratch at 34. His voice cracked. You're going to finish your degree, become this incredible therapist, and I'm going to be the guy who held you back. Mara stood very still, snow beginning to fall around them. Is that really what you think? She asked softly. He couldn't meet her eyes. I think you walked into my life when I had nothing to offer, and I'm terrified that one day you'll realize that. The silence between them felt impossibly heavy. Something had to give. 3 days later, Mara texted him an address. The Holly and Pine. Daniel's heart clenched when he saw it. He almost didn't go, again. But something about the choice of location, the deliberateness of it, pulled him out the door. When he arrived, the restaurant looked different than it had on Christmas Eve. Quieter. The holiday decorations were gone, replaced by soft spring flowers on each table. And there, in the same booth where he'd sat alone 4 months ago, was Mara. She stood when she saw him, nervous energy radiating from her. Thanks for coming. Mara. Let me go first, she said quickly. Please. He nodded. Sliding into the booth across from her, the same seat his blind date had abandoned, the same view of the door she'd walked out of. Mara took a breath. You think you had nothing to offer me that night. But Daniel, you were the one who saved my night. Her voice wavered. I'd worked a double shift. I was exhausted, stressed about tuition, worried I'd made a mistake choosing grad school over a real salary. And then I saw you. This man in an expensive suit, sitting alone, looking like his world had just fallen apart. And I thought, here's someone who needs kindness right now, someone I can help. She reached across the table, taking his hand. But you helped me too. You reminded me why I wanted to be a therapist in the first place. You showed me what it looks like when someone chooses to grow instead of staying stuck. Her eyes shimmered. You're not a mess, Daniel. You're brave. You walked away from everything safe because you wanted something real. Do you know how rare that is? Mara, I don't need you to have it all figured out. I just need you to stop running away from the people who love you. A tear slipped down her cheek. Because I do. Love you. I think I have since the night you showed up at my mom's house with that ridiculously expensive wine, looking terrified and hopeful at the same time. Daniel felt something break open in his chest, something that had been locked tight for years. I love you too, he whispered. I'm just scared I'm not enough. You are, she said firmly. You always have been. You just needed someone to show you. He stood, moving around to her side of the booth, and pulled her into his arms. She fit there perfectly. Her face pressed against his chest, his chin resting on top of her head. I'm sorry, he murmured. For pulling away. For doubting this. Don't do it again, she said, voice muffled against his shirt. Because I'm not going anywhere. Around them, the restaurant continued its quiet evening rhythm. But in that booth, the same one where Daniel's story had started, everything felt complete. Full circle. Home. 6 months later, Daniel stood in the doorway of a small community center in Queens, watching Mara lead a support group for young adults struggling with anxiety and loneliness. She was radiant, confident, compassionate, exactly who she'd always been meant to become. He'd found his own path, too. A smaller firm, one focused on affordable housing instead of luxury high-rises. Less money, more meaning. His father still didn't understand. But Rita had framed the newspaper article about his first project and hung it on her refrigerator. After the session ended, Mara found him waiting, 2 cups of coffee in hand, hers with too much cream, just how she liked it. Ready? She asked, threading her fingers through his. Always. They walked out into the summer evening, past the place where a broken man had once sat alone at Christmas, convinced he had nothing to offer. He'd been wrong. Sometimes the best things in life came not from perfection, but from showing up, broken, uncertain, and willing to let someone see you anyway. And sometimes, if you were lucky, they stayed.